The Macabre World podcast is brought to you by Darker Art Studio, home of real human bone jewelry. Stock and custom pieces are available, so visit us on the web at www.darkerartstudio.com and show them your darker art side. Macabre World, a podcast from Darker Art Studio, where we explore the dark, strange, and unusual from this world and beyond. Hello and welcome to the Macabre World podcast. I'm your host, Rocky Digati, and with me yet again is Stephen H. Martin, Stephen Hawley Martin. Steve, thanks for coming back. It's always good to see you. How are you today?
I'm great, Rocky. Thanks for having me on. I'm looking forward to our chat.
Yes, well, you have written many books, but most recently you have a new book called Mastery: Discover and Pursue Your Purpose, Find Meaning and Fulfillment, and that's on your Oakley Press label. And tell me a little bit about how this book came about and how it fits in with what you've written before.
Well, I like to write about and research the true nature of reality, life after death, all the sort of things that come with, quantum physics, that sort of thing. And it occurred to me that the reality that we live in is most people really don't understand what it is. They think it's either what they were taught in school, which is that it's a material universe and there's nothing but matter, or they're churchgoers and believe, that there's a sort of anthropomorphic God that created everything and is outside of his creation. And so what I've done after kind of learning that really consciousness is the ground of being, that in each one of us, the I am, the sense of self, is the ground of being, and that we're all share the same consciousness, even though we think we're all separate. That when people realize that, and I think there's a great awakening going on where more and more people are coming to understand that really once you really get that through your head, you realize that what we're told and taught in school and our parents said to do for a living or for whatever is not necessarily what's going to make you happy. That what's going to make you happy is using whatever talents that you have, what I call your dharma, your unique gift that you have to give the world, using that to help others and maybe making a living doing that is what's going to make you happy. And to me, that's what mastery is. And I thought I ought to try to get that word out with a book. So I start in the book talking about reality and what it is, that we're all one organism, that we think we're all different, but we're sparks of that one mind, and that we're really here to help each other and to use our talents in a way that not only helps others, but makes us feel fulfilled and that we're doing something worthwhile. And to me, that's what mastery is. If you can figure out what it is, and I try to give people a way to do that in this book, figure out what your dharma is, and then how you can use it either as a job or a career or as a part-time thing or some sort of after work, after school kind of activity. If you can use that to help others, that's what's going to bring you a sense of purpose and fulfillment. So that's kind of a quick overview of what the book's about and why I wrote it.
Well, I mean, something I'm going to use myself as an example. In addition to podcasting, I have a real job that I work 40 to 50 hours a week at in the tech field. And that's why I have that job, because I like indoor plumbing. I'm very, very addicted to indoor plumbing, electricity, and having a roof over my head. And outside of that, I mean, I'm a musician, I'm an artist and a broadcaster, and I do voiceover as well. So I have all of these artistic pursuits, and they become side hustles and everything. And I've often said there are a lot of us out there where our job is not really who we are. It's what we do. Who I am is involving in my art, in my music, in my writing, and all the things that I do that are creative based. But at this point in time, they don't cover the indoor plumbing, the electricity, and all that good stuff. So I think, a lot of people are trying to look for that kind of balance to be able to,
Yeah, I think
find
that's right.
fulfillment.
And sometimes what happens is, I was the same way. I was in the advertising business for most of my life, most of my career, adult life. And I enjoyed that because it's, you get to use your creativity. But sometimes selling soap and widgets and insurance with advertising, it can be fun, when you come up with something like the Geico Gecko or whatever, but it's not, doesn't give you a sense of fulfillment. So what I love to do is to write, and I like to think and figure things out. And so about 40 years ago, as a young man working every day, I started getting up an hour early, got up at 6 o'clock instead of 7 o'clock, wrote for an hour, and then went to work and did the work that paid for the indoor plumbing and the heat and the air conditioning and the food on the table. But after a while, that it took a long time, but I got to a point where I was able to put the advertising thing aside and devote full time to the writing and researching. And I've been doing that now for about the last 10 years. And I don't make a whole lot of money at it, but it's enough to pay the electric bill and so forth.
And I'll just let our listeners know you do appear to be indoors. So, that's
Yeah.
a start.
Yes.
But I
But
think I
I
think
think that's what a lot of people need to do is if they could have that side hustle that really gives them a sense of satisfaction, it may lead to something more where they can do it full time.
I think that's an important point because, like I said, a lot of us have, I think all of us at this point have some sort of economic constraint put on our time to make sure that we have those bases covered and that we're able. I mean, it would be lovely to have as my mother would say, a life of leisure. But I don't think a lot of us do. But I think what's important about what you're telling us in the book and here is that you don't need to have a life of leisure to pursue what makes you happy.
I think that's right. Yeah. And I get, the first book I wrote was back 40 years ago. I had an Apple, I think it was an Apple II. It was, didn't even have a hard drive.
No, I
I wrote
remember those.
on that. And, writing an hour a day, if you could write a page a day in 365 days, you've got a book.
Right.
So it's a matter of, setting that time aside. Just think how much time people spend on screens nowadays. If they would just, cut that screen time an hour and use it to pursue something that they really get into, it might develop into something they can do full time.
I think if I gave up Wordle, I could probably conquer the world. But it's there's a lot of points to ponder, like you said about making the commitment, and I think that commitment can be daunting for a lot of people. But when you break it down the way you do in your book, it makes a lot more sense. It's showing you that, like, you're not eating an elephant one bite. You're doing it one bite at a time. You're doing a page a day. You're doing an hour a day. You can slowly start to build. And that's, I think, a really good life coach lesson across the board, whether it's for pursuing, whatever it is you're pursuing. I think it's something that, helps people become less overwhelmed with the things that they want to do versus what they have to do.
And one
And
of the
that,
things I do in the book is try to give people readers some ideas about how they can figure out what it is, what their dharma is, what the thing is that puts them in the zone. If you think back to when you were a child, what kind of activity did you get into where you lost track of time? And how does that translate as an adult that can put you in that same zone again? And what I suggest people do is to take some time, take a Saturday or a Sunday, maybe go to the library, leave your computer in the car, leave your phone in the car, and just take a pad and a paper, pen or whatever, and start asking yourself. And I give a bunch of questions, but the main one is, what is the activity that puts you in the zone. And then how can that be used in some way to help others or to provide a service to others that is valuable to them and makes you feel good about what you're doing. And it, it gives, I break it down into that sort of a situation where then you figure out what are the obstacles between me and being able to use that activity to help others. And you can put together a plan. How do you overcome those activities? I had a friend, for example, actually my brother-in-law, who was an engineer at General Motors, helping to design cars. He'd gone through, went to engineering school, and he realized that he didn't really like doing that. He wanted to be a doctor. So he, at about 30 years old, figured out a way to get himself to go to medical school. First, he had to go take some courses that he didn't have that were requisite, like biochemistry and things like that. But he did it, and he's in his 50s. He's a doctor. He loves what he does. But at 30 something, most people say, "Oh, I can't do that," But he figured out a way. He overcame the obstacles. He ended up owing a lot of money, but being a doctor, he's able to pay off those bills.
It is a trade-off. You're bringing up something else that you addressed in the book, which I think is important to discuss, is fear. Fear is huge. I mean, we're all afraid of jumping off a cliff into nothingness. We're all afraid of jumping off a cliff and landing badly.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the leap of faith is key here. How do we mitigate that terror?
I've read, and I think it's probably true, that there are really only two fears that are instinctive that you're born with, and that's the fear of loud noises, boom, lightning striking, I guess. And the other is fear of heights, falling and killing yourself that way. The other ones are all fears that come from the environment you grew up in, the things you learned, or what people said. And they're basically let's see, there's something like 6 fears that we typically have that hold us back. The fear of illness, of getting sick, fear of loss of love, that causes jealousy. You're worried about, your significant other falling in love with somebody else. The fear of old age, the fear of death, the fear of, and I have put together a meditation, a kind of self-hypnotic meditation. It's on my website that I used. Gosh, I created that. It's the same recording that I created over 30 years ago. And I listened to that recording every night for 30 nights, for 30 days. And I still go back to it now, 30 years later. Every now and then I'll go back to it. And it is designed to get rid of those fears, to program your subconscious mind. And it's worked for me. It just opened up a whole new world for me after those 30 days. It's on my website. You won't find it in the menu. You'll have to put in shmartin.com/auto suggestion. And if you put that /auto suggestion, it'll take you right to that page. There are actually 2 recordings on that page. The one on top is the one that I'm talking about. The one below it is kind of a reinforcement thing after you've done the 30 days.
I'll put a link also in the podcast description that folks can click on to that page.
Yeah. And I tell you what, listen to it every night. I did it at night. I'll go to sleep. I still do it every now and then. And it's programmed so that if you are asleep, you won't wake up. But if you need to wake up because you're doing it in the middle of the day, you will wake up. It gives you that option at the end. And your subconscious mind will take care of it. And it will reprogram your mind to get rid of those 6 basic fears.
Well, that's a tremendous thing. I'm going to give that a try because you know what? I think that we can all use a little bit of fearlessness. And it's interesting. you bring up the whole idea of the concept of reality, and you bring up that it even involves matter versus antimatter, quantum physics and stuff. And I'm going to be the first one to tell you and everybody else, quantum physics not my best subject, but I have read and I've become very interested biographically in Einstein. I think he's an interesting guy. And I've read books of his letters where he incorporates his thinking into his personal beliefs, and that, well, he's an interesting cat. And one of the things that I started thinking about, and I was curious, and I asked this on a lot of the podcasts, and if I've asked before, forgive me, but it seems more germane in this discussion than not. When people are looking at spirituality as an explanation for what I'm going to blanketly refer to as paranormal activity, when people are capturing things on film, when they're hearing EVP of voices having conversations, when there's interactive activity, and there's what I'll say any kind of an interaction captured with energy, with some kind of an energy or consciousness that's shared. I think that people are going straight to a spiritual description. That's a ghost, it's a spirit, it's a this, that, or the other. Is there a chance, and I'm wondering if this isn't a big part of it, that a lot of that type of explanation exists because it comes from a time when we didn't understand what we do now about quantum physics, and also in part the fact that there is so much we still don't understand about time, space, and quantum physics. I want to think, is there more of quantum physics than spirituality to what we're calling like paranormal events? A lot of this reincarnation, this all gets kind of lumped into the same sort of unusual paranormal activity. And, because we've all had deja vu. We've all had it one way or another. We don't know why we have it. Maybe our subconscious remembers something we don't consciously remember having a tie to, or maybe it's something more. And it gets very mired into, I think, people trying to justify that with whatever their inherent religious beliefs are or aren't. If some folks are devoid, and that's fine too. You know, how do we get that all together? Where do you think those connections lie?
Well, first of all, everything is energy. You mentioned Einstein, E equals mc squared. Energy equals mass times the speed of light squared. There is no such thing as matter the way people think about matter. Matter is energy, little atoms that are kind of tiny little solar systems that come from this consciousness that is the ground of being, the mind, this infinite mind. And I'm not talking. It's not an anthropomorphic God. It's we live in and are part of an infinite mind that generates what we perceive as consciousness. And we, human beings and all life, are the eyes and ears of that infinite mind. What quantum physics tells you is that that physical reality does not exist without somebody observing it. That's what the double slit experiment that I believe I put in that book talks about, where if the researcher knows where the photons landed on the screen, then that creates matter in the form of photons. If he doesn't know or she doesn't know, then you get a wave pattern, which is only potential reality. It is the observer's consciousness that creates the matter. It isn't matter without that consciousness. And our world, what we live in that looks like solid stuff, is not really solid stuff. It's what our mind creates. And it exists if we don't exist, because there are other minds looking at it, viewing it. But so what Einstein is saying is that what exists is energy that's conscious. He even said reality is merely an illusion, albeit a very persistent one, something to that effect. The guy who created and came up with quantum theory, Max Planck, said in essence, that consciousness is the ground of being, and that an intelligent mind is the matrix of all matter. That's what makes the little atoms and things spin and so forth. So anyway, to answer your question about the macabre, also I learned in physics, and you probably did too, that matter and energy cannot be created or destroyed. Matter is energy and it can't be created or destroyed. So our consciousness is energy that's conscious. It cannot be destroyed. Our bodies may die, but our bodies are like an overcoat. Our consciousness will live on. And I think what happens, let me give you an example of a haunting. I don't know if I told you about this in our last conversation, but I had my first wife was French, and we used to go to France every summer for 2 or 3 weeks, and she had some friends over there, and one of them was married to a count, and they had a summer house, what they called a castle. It's a big house in Lorraine.
Le Chateau.
They inherited along with his title. And when they inherited it, the place had not been lived in about 30 years. So he had made some money in the stock market and decided to renovate this place so they could have a place to go on the weekends. They lived in Paris, but they could go out there on the weekends or for summer vacation or whatever. Anyway, my wife and I went to visit them in their newly renovated castle, chateau, and he told me a story. He said that when they were renovating the house, they had to put a new roof on it, do a lot of work, that they would come there on the weekends and see what was going on, talk to the workers. And when they were going to sleep at night, just as they were passing from consciousness to sleep, they would hear somebody screaming for help. Did I ever tell you this story? No?
No, not at all. This is very interesting. I'm waiting to hear.
So they would hear somebody, and then
goodness.
if he woke up in the middle of the night at 3 o'clock in the morning, he would hear, something that was in his head, but someone screaming for help. So finally, he went around searching to try to see where it could possibly be coming from. And he went down into the cellar where there was a wine cellar and so forth. And he noticed that there was a wall that looked a little bit newer than the other ones. So he got the workmen who were there doing the renovations to come down and tear down that wall. And behind that wall was a skeleton.
This is so Cask of Amontillado. It's not funny. Wow.
They didn't know how long it had been there, but at least since before World War II. I mean, it'd been there a long time.
That is so Poe.
So they took the skeleton and they gave it a Christian burial. And after that, there were no more
cries of help. Wow, that's wild.
This theory, my friend Henri Dimitri's theory was the guy had been bopped on the head, taken down to the cellar, bricked up behind the wall, and then he came to. And he'd been screaming for help ever since. And he didn't know that he died. He didn't know that he could just pass through the wall. He thought he was still alive. And that happens. Apparently, if someone can be killed and not know they're dead. And
that is a common theme. I've talked to people who have both, mediums who speak with others and other people who've had encounters. And it does seem that there is sometimes a disconnect between the physical, for lack of a better term, and spiritual world where we exist, matter versus antimatter, I guess. And that many times there are instances where people don't know they're dead.
Yeah. Another instance, this one I don't know firsthand, but a friend of mine goes up to, is kind of involved in the Monroe Institute. Are you aware of the Monroe Institute?
I am not. What's the Monroe Institute?
Up in Western Virginia, in the shadow of the Blue Ridge Mountains. And it was founded by a guy named James Monroe, who was actually a radio executive. He was a vice president at NBC. But he had an out-of-body experience and was trying to figure that out. And he invented this process called hemisync, I think it's called, that enables some people. They put you in like a chamber, and you have this hemisync music sound going on, and some people are able to have out of body experiences when they do that, and that's what they do at the Monroe Institute. You Google it if you're interested.
That is
Anyway,
very
they
curious.
have people who go out of body whenever there's a big disaster, like 9/11 or the bombing in Oklahoma, or when a bunch of people are killed, and they go out and they help souls that are confused see the light, find the light, and go to it. And on one of these visits, this guy told me that he went out and found a man, and of course, distance and time doesn't count in that non-physical realm that they go into. He found a man who had been uh, attached to part of a wreckage of a ship that had gone down in the 19th century in the Irish Sea, the sea between England and Ireland, and had been uh, holding on to this, whatever was keeping him afloat,
Oh my goodness.
for over 100 years. Of course, time doesn't mean anything.
Right, but
And
that's got
and
to leave a mark on,
and
or a
he
rift or something.
yeah, he talked to this guy and explained to him that he was dead and that he needed to go to the light, and was able to do that. So that's the kind of thing they do there at the Monroe Institute. I mean, you could go there for a weekend and do the hemisync thing and maybe have an out of body experience. Uh, but they have regulars who do this sort of thing, that go to help people who could be confused because they're killed instantly.
They're ushers. I'm not being funny. They're ushers.
They're ushers, yeah.
I mean, you're describing the work of an usher. I mean, they're like ushers.
Yeah, you might probably for your show. There's a guy that I interviewed twice when I used to have a show. His name is Skip Atwater. I think it's AT. Skip is not his real name, but that's what he goes by. I'll try to see if I can find his contact information.
Oh, I'd love
Anyway,
that.
he worked at the Monroe Institute for a long time. He's retired now. Before that, he was the director of the Stargate uh, initiative for the U.S. Army, where in the 1970s and 80s, they had psychics
That's
who,
psyops.
yeah, who were essentially spying on the Eastern Bloc and Soviet Union, using their psychic abilities to find out what was going on. And he was the head of that. And then he went to the Monroe Institute and was with them for quite a while. But
I think a lot of us are thinking of the movie The Men Who Stare at Goats.
yeah, I didn't see that movie, but yeah, I mean, it's interesting. He said that they were able to, back when uh, the hostages were taken in Iran, 40 years ago, right before Reagan was elected, and and during Jimmy Carter's, that they were able to figure out where they were, what rooms they were in. They had all the information from their remote viewing abilities, and it was a stupid sandstorm that crashed the helicopter that it came to rescue. But they knew exactly what they needed to do. But anyway, I guess the hostages were let go when Reagan was elected.
Well, that's
But
that's amazing. Well, I think there's so much more that we don't understand than that we do.
oh yeah, no question
And
about it.
one of the things, like I said, that I enjoyed about your book is that it is different from a lot of the other books in the fact that you're actually giving step-by-step practical advice. It's
Yeah,
not just merely conceptual. It doesn't tell me that I need to, let go of my fears. It shows you how,
right.
which I think is an extremely important bit to point out. One of the last things I wanted to talk about is, when you talk about the ability to manifest, the ability to harness all this stuff. I mean, sometimes people, if they have been denying their dharma or they don't find their dharma, or if they're lost or if they're in that rut, sometimes in a very real sense, they develop clinical depression.
Yeah,
It's very common. if someone is experiencing those things, obviously all of us know that if you feel that you're experiencing those types of symptoms, you should talk to a qualified mental health professional to help yourself get through that. But does this type of practice, doesn't that enhance the healing from something like that?
It does. You know, your mind creates your reality, your thoughts, your beliefs. And essentially, if you want to, if you're not happy with the way things are, you need to change your thoughts and your beliefs. Uh, you know, we don't have to do what we think. Our egos are a construction that was built up from the time we were born, because of the family we were born into, the culture we were born into, what teachers we had in the school. All those things contributed to the beliefs and the ideas that are in your subconscious mind, and that's what creates your reality. And so when those thoughts come up, and this is something I started doing when I felt a reaction to something, an emotion to something that happened to me, I would call time out. I'm not going to react. I'm going to think about why. Why did that thought come up? Why did I have that feeling? Because I don't have to listen to it if I don't want to. So I've got another book called Let Go Your Ego, which goes into this whole idea a whole lot more about how you can reprogram yourself, not necessarily listen to your ego. Take advantage of that moment between when something happens and when you react to it to stop and think.
It's amazing. Some of the phrases that you're using are familiar to me. I've read books by Ram Dass, and I have, I'm a big fan of Sri Chinmoy, as well as, I grew up with a wonderful adult as an influence. Hi, other mother. And Karen taught me about Ram Dass. She taught me about Sri Chinmoy. She taught me about Dafri John, and a lot of the Eastern thought that I learned initially came from her. And one of the things I think that people are going to get too is that there is a way to meld that spirituality, the science, and put it into a context where it's practical use to improve your life.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So once again, folks can go to your website, which is www.shmartin.com. I'm going to put a link to your main website, as well as a link to your auto suggestion, audio
suggestion. I'll send you a link to make sure.
Okay, and we're gonna get it linked. So we're gonna have live links for your website as well as the auto suggestion. The book is available through your website.
Yes, it's on. In fact, it's on the homepage. You could just click on it. It'll take you right to the page on Amazon. Click on the cover, and you can learn more about it and read part of it and decide whether you want to get it.
Okay, well, I had the pleasure of reading it all the way through, and I think there's a lot of information in there that we can all use.
Well, thank you so much.
And thank you for being here once again. I want to say it's great to have you back. And folks, you can go ahead and click on those links that you'll see in the podcast, or go to www.shmartin.com, and you can learn a little bit about the universe and yourself. So once again, thanks for listening. And remember, stay kooky out there. Thank you for listening to Macabre World. You can find us on the web at www.darkerartsstudio.com.